This is Echo Soundworks with Slate Companies. In this video, I'm going to show you guys some great techniques you can use to make any preset in Anna 2 sound more analog, to make it sound like a Moog, a Prophet, a Juno, any type of analog style synth, right? Now, this is going to be great, obviously, for those genres like synthwave, where having an analog inspired sound is paramount to the actual track or song in that genre. But this will also help you add some cool patches, some presets to your more modern productions like maybe future bass or trap, moombahton, whatever it might be, by integrating and using some really analog flavored sounds. Now, Anna 2 makes this incredibly easy because there's a lot of analog kind of goodies sprinkled in throughout the synth, and we're going to check those out in this video. So first and foremost, we've initialized our patch. So this is what we have. Now, what we want to do is we want to first load up a analog waveform, right? So this waveform we see here is a pretty digital looking and sounding saw waveform. It looks like it's, a mirror image of itself on different sides of the axis. It looks perfect. It's very bright. It's very buzzy. It's in your face. Sounds like a great sounding digital waveform. Well, we want to go more analog. So not all waveforms are created equally. You'd be surprised. So let's go and load up a new waveform. We're going to go to the Slate digital folder, Slate analog, and let's choose a Moog saw. You'll immediately notice that it looks different, right? It's not as high on the first half of the waveform. It's got a little curvature. It's a little bit rounded. So what that means in terms of sound is it's going to be a little bit more mellow. Even for a saw, it's going to have a lot of upper end high harmonics, just like every saw wave will, but it's not going to be as buzzy, as shimmery as the digital waveform. Let's take a listen. So step one is obviously load up an analog waveform. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy this waveform to oscillator 2. And then in oscillator 3, we're going to load up another analog waveform from the Moog, and we're going to load up a different one. So we're going to load up a triangle, which is a great way to introduce some sub-frequencies without using a sine. It's got a little bit more high-end content than a typical sine wave. Obviously, if you can use an analog waveform, that's going to get you closer. We also, when we get to that step, want to use the analog filters as well as the analog envelopes. Not sure if you guys know this, but Anna has analog envelopes. So let's actually do that now. Let's go and load up one of the analog filter types, and we're going to load up the Moog or Moogie LP, so low pass. Now, we used a Moog triangle and a Moog saw, so this is just fitting. So let's turn our cutoff knob all the way to 1. And that is our sound. Let's change this to a monophonic patch. And now let's head over to our envelopes. So we're using the amp envelope right now, and we have it set to Anna 2. Well, there's actually a whole different algorithm for this envelope, and we can choose analog. And we can do the same thing with our filter envelope, which we're going to use to control a bit of our filter. So now our sound sounds like this. Those are the kind of goodies that you can access directly in Anna 2 to get more of an analog inspired sound. To recap, it's an analog waveform, analog filter, and analog envelope types. Now the next techniques we're going to look at are more sound design oriented. So you want to try to think when you're trying to create like a Moog or a Prophet or a Juno style patch, you want to think like how someone who's actually using the physical synth would have to program the patch. For instance, a Moog Model D does not have voices of unison. So if you want to create a detune sounding patch, you have to detune the 3 oscillators against each other to get there. So we're going to do that with oscillators 1 and 2. So let's go to oscillator 1. I'm going to turn my fine pitch down to -4. We're going to go to oscillator 2 and turn this up to +5. And now our patch sounds like this. So it's immediately a lot closer to that analog style sound that we're all familiar with. And a lot of famous Moog patches and sounds would actually have one of the octaves one of the oscillators, an octave apart. So let's do that. Let's turn oscillator 1 down an entire octave. Right, so we already have a sound that sounds quite analog. Well, let's take it a step further with some sound design. So to do this, we're going to use a G envelope. So I'm going to go into the G envelope. We're going to create a new dot, and we're going to, let's delete this one. Hold down Alt or Option on either side of that dot to kind of curve our whole shape, right? And we're going to hit X. And what we're going to do is we're going to introduce some non-linearities, some imperfections, if you will, into our sound by modulating our G envelope into specific sections of Ana 2. So the first component or part of Ana 2 I'm going to modulate is actually going to be the phase of, we're going to modulate the phase of oscillators 1 and 2. So let's go and select oscillator 1, and we're going to go to phase. Now the reason we're doing this is because analog synths were made with actual hardware, real parts, and electricity. There's usually going to be some fluctuations with the electrical current at different stages within the circuit board or within the actual synth. There's going to be some imperfections along the way. Those imperfections have actually created that quote-unquote analog sound. So right now, if we play this, we can see that there's a lot of movement on our waveform. So we're going to hit loop and retrigger. So every time I hit a note, it retriggers this loop, and it's going to loop if I hold down a really long note. So let's turn the depth down a little bit as well. All right, so we want to do the same thing with our second oscillator. So let's go to our mod matrix. We're going to select our G envelope number 1, and we're going to go to oscillator 2 phase. And let's turn this depth down quite a bit on it. So let's continue adding a couple more modulation sources for this G envelope. Let's go and select G envelope one more time. And we're going to select volume all and then turn this down to about 5. So now there's going to be slight, or maybe even 3, slight variations to the overall volume of our patch, but not enough to make you think that it's actually moving or wobbling or anything of that nature. And finally, let's do one more. My favorite destinations for this type of sound is going to be in our filter, and we're going to modulate the filter drive a little bit. All right, the last thing we're going to add in this video, a lot of the analog synths would use pink noise or white noise. So we've already used all 3 of our available waveform or wavetable oscillators, so we need to do this in our sample oscillator. So that's pretty easy to do. We can just click on the waveform selector, go to the factory, we can go to noise, and there's actually some classic analog like Juno noises and that sort of stuff, but we just want a white noise for this. Load that in there, turn the volume down. And we have our analog inspired preset. So to recap the steps, guys, first load up an analog waveform, and where there's a bunch included in the Slate Digital folder. After that, make sure you're going to use an analog filter type, right? It wouldn't make sense to use a comb filter or a format filter if you're going for authenticity. And there's a whole folder of analog filters. Third, use the analog envelopes for both your filter, amp, and if you're using a modulation envelope, that as well. And fourth, introduce some imperfections with an envelope or even an LFO to things like the pitch, the tuning, the volume, things that make the sound less digital, more analog. All right, guys, so that sums up this video. If you have any questions or comments, post them, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you like this video and you want to see more videos like it and keep up to date with our Ana 2 content, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.
Ana 2 is available in the Slate Digital All Access Pass, which gives you thousands of dollars worth of award-winning plugins, the industry's most game-changing synthesizer, Ana 2, and the very best masterclass production courses taught by the industry's biggest pros, all for $14.99 per month.